Hi, everybody. My name is Donna Gorton. Welcome to my show, Willows Bend. Tonight, we are going to be talking about the dancing plague, aka the dancing mania. Now, this is a very interesting topic. I had no idea just how interesting until I got into it, both from a psychological standpoint, a physical standpoint. You're going to see, I don't want to jump ahead in the show, and I'm trying to get my chat opened up in my group right now. So for those of you who are new to me, perhaps through Soma Fusion Network, I do have a Facebook group called the Willows Bend, and I monitor the chat in there live. So if you see me looking off to the side, it's because I'm watching my group chat, because we noticed that wherever, whether I go on YouTube or not, people will from my group just go over there, and they're the ones in chat. So to make it easier, because some people have a hard time with technology and making it over there, even though it's not that hard to do, people still struggle with getting me there. So at any rate, you see me looking off to the side or answering random things, that's what I'm talking about. So bear with that, please. But thank you all very much for joining me. Still waiting for it to start in my group here. So I also have a page on Facebook called Beyond the Veil, and I go live in there for readings on every Friday night. Both lives start at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So you can find me there. And I don't know why it's not coming up in my group right now. Let me go out and come back in. And maybe just, there we go, try that one. There we are. Gotcha. Okay, hi guys, now I see you. So let me just say hi to everybody there so they know I can get them. There we go. All right, party on. So, what else? So I'm on Soma Fusion Network, which is a network that we are in support of, especially women in a really male-driven job market, if you will, platform. It's predominantly males who do it and go live all the time and run these types of things. And we are all about empowering people, male or females, but definitely women who, they may be having a hard time getting the show started. We're here for you because we broadcast globally on pretty well every social media platform. You can find us on Facebook at Soma Fusion is the page name, and on YouTube that's the same name of the channel. You can find us online on the web at soma-fusion.com, and again on every other media platform, iHeartRadio as well. So we're kind of everywhere. Yay us. So, and to all my cohorts on Soma Fusion, blessed be to all of you, and thank you for all your hard work. We definitely appreciate it. And a special thanks going out this week, today, especially for Memorial Day, and all of those who served. We definitely love and appreciate and express gratitude for your service, and take time to pause and remember those that just any loved one we've lost along the way. It's a nice time to remember those people. So again, for our veterans, give thanks for them. So thank you to everyone out there. A special thanks to my dad for his service during Vietnam. My dad, Steve Stillman, if you happen to be listening, watching the replay, what have you, I will be giving you a message later, but for now, I send you all my love and thank you for your service. So that said, my group also likes me to do kind of a circle of protection / blessing for everybody. And hi, everybody in there. Hey, Chris, there's my stranger. I don't have my glasses on yet, but I will get them on in a second. So let's get the stage fired up, Miss Sandy. And Sandy's my group's firebug. I promise I'm going to light it over top of the dish so I don't risk setting myself on fire. It happened a couple weeks ago. I was lighting something in my dress I happened to have on was quite flammable and melty, and the match broke in half, and the head of the match literally flew when I was trying to light it, and it landed on my dress and scorched a hole right through it. Oh, I was so mad. It was a brand new dress too. So that said, with this sage, I cast a circle of protection around everyone who is watching the show live, listening to it on the radio, anywhere in the world, as well as during the replay. May this circle of protection protect you from any harm, negativity, ill intent, or otherwise, and may it be returned to sender ×3, and they can just keep that stuff to themselves. And may this protection follow each and every person outside of the show and to their personal lives to keep them safe from any ill will, harm, or negativity. So I will it, so mote it be. Do a little circle around all of you guys here too, for good measure. There we go. Now, so again, the topic tonight is the dancing plague, also known as the dancing mania, which was, again, a very real thing that took place back in medieval times. So let me get my glasses on so I can see my chat. You guys are all very welcome. Yep, fire up, Sandy. That's right. And welcome to everybody who in my group who is watching me in there. I appreciate all of you. And if there happen to be any veterans in there, or you are related to one, my thanks for their service. And we express gratitude and love to them as well. So with that, let's jump into that here. So this is going to jump around slightly, only in that there are different views on it, both from a psychological standpoint and modern day theories trying to explain what happened. It's a very well documented thing from even back then. It was well documented, these incidences. And something similar happened also in like Italy and things like that, that were kind of from a separate reasoning, or thought to be from a separate reasoning from the main event, but still kind of related as far as etymology and so forth. So we're going to cover all of that tonight. There we go. Not tonight. Let the dog get settled beside me. For those who might be new to me, that's my dog Jake. He's kind of the mascot for Willows Bend. My cat little girl is sleeping, I believe, in the other room. Yeah, she's not behind me. More times than not, she makes an appearance and walks through to have to, say hi on camera. Oh, yeah. And a very happy birthday to Miss Linda Miller. I did wish her a birthday in the birthday post, or happy birthday in the birthday post. At the beginning of this month, I do kind of a group birthday wish post. And for any member who has a birthday during that month in my group, Willows Bend. But to reiterate that, happy birthday to you. I did check to make sure I did do that this month, and I did. So anyway, hey, Marianne. So happy birthday again, Miss Linda. I hope you've had a fabulous day and continues into a fabulous night filled with love, many blessings, and the kind of love that endearing family can bring. Hey, Brenda. Yeah, I just had like a flare up that night. I wasn't doing great. So I did end up redoing Friday's show on Saturday night instead. So I did like a makeup thing. Wasn't a huge audience for it because people aren't used to seeing me on a Saturday. So, before we get started too, hey, Mary. So this Tuesday, we have a special show happening on Soma Fusion for one of our broadcasters who's on hiatus right now. She's helping her daughter with a school project, Amanda McManus. She usually does the show Goddesses and Devils with our fearless leader, Katie, but the show is on hiatus right now. But she's helping her daughter, Paige, with a school project that's going to be talking about substance and drug abuse's influence in society and so forth. So we're going to be doing a special broadcast Tuesday night, starting at 7 p.m. Eastern time, and it's going to be viewable across the board in all our normal places, or you can listen to it on air as well. We are going to have a panel of people on the show and to be discussing about these things from their standpoint, or perhaps their career field or what have you. And we're going to be, it ought to be a really good thing. It's an interesting topic, and there aren't too many people who have not been influenced in some way, shape, or form from substance or drug abuse. So that said, I want to throw that out there that'll be this coming Tuesday. So tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern time, on Soma Fusion Network in partnership with iEvolveTV. So it's going to be on there as well. So anyway, I'm going to also be on there as well and give my piece on it from a social work standpoint, because that's what I used to do in my previous work experience life, was as a social worker. So dealt with it in a variety of ways in that manner. So we're going to be talking about that tomorrow night. So anyway, now let's jump into it. I didn't want to miss throwing that out there. So everyone's aware, I did post about it in my group, the Willows, but shared it out everywhere I can. But just to reiterate it, so you guys should be able to view it here in Willows Bend. We'll share it in there as well, so you can watch it live in there if interested. So there we go. All right, so episode 133, the dancing plague. It sounds like so far out, doesn't it? I came across this topic in other research I was doing for another topic, and I saw mention of it, which is how I come across a lot of my topics I suggest. The group suggests lots of topics too, but some of them I come across in researching other things, and I'll come across like one word mention of it, or one sentence. I'll be like, ooh, what's that? And I take a little rabbit hop off my trail and take a little side excursion and go look it up real quick and make note of it. So this is something I came across like this month or something when researching some other topic. So definitely interested in those in my group. At the end of each show, we vote on the topic to do for the following minority rules, and anybody who happens to have any suggestions can get a hold of me at any time through private messenger, through Donna Who Walks the Land Gorton, which is my medicine woman name, by the way, and Messenger on Facebook. They can message me through my Beyond the Veil page on Facebook. They can get a hold of me through Soma Fusion page, or leave a message that way. So we are accessible. I am accessible and reachable. If you have a show topic, don't be afraid to throw it out there, and we'll put it on the list and we vote on it, and eventually it will get covered. So Brenda, you have heard about that. Very cool. Hey, Miss Tanya, you're in a timeout again, Karen? Oh my goodness. Should I ask what you did this time? She's our little rebel of the group, but we love her. Couldn't get your text to work, huh? Well, you're here now, Nancy, and that's what matters. So there we go. All right. So the year was 1518 of the current century. And again, this is also called the dancing mania or dance epidemic. So where did it happen? So it predominantly was recorded as happening in Strasbourg, Alsace, or modern day France. So I guess I'm probably mispronouncing the Alsace part because I don't speak French. Fully own that. So if you see me or hear me butcher it, my apologies. Not a speaker. Hi, Kim. So I'll just say modern day France. That works around that one, right? So what the hell happened? Like, why was this so broadly recorded? I think because of the bizarre nature of it. I'm afraid to comment too much. I was only sharing videos. Guess there's a daily limit. Yeah, I've gotten busted for that too before, Karen, for sharing out too much, for using Facebook too much. Yeah, that's when I think that their robots or their AI technology, whatever is in command central for Facebook, because it doesn't make any sense. And there is no limit in the community standards on sharing or commenting too much, but they bust you on it sure enough. So people died dancing, correct. So what the hell happened? So from July 1518 through September 1518, somewhere between 50 to 400 people. Now, again, I question, like, why is there such a big gap in the numbers? Because it's kind of unknown. Oh no, there is no limit listed, and I looked it up through the community standards, and there is no limit, Karen, on what on sharing or commenting listed in the community standards of Facebook. So calling Facebook out on that one. So from July 1518 through September 1518, somewhere between 50 and 400 people suddenly took to dancing for days, like for no real reason, no valid anything. Like they just took to the street and started dancing. Facebook to my emojis for about an hour or two today. Yeah. Hey, Ronnie. So how did it start? So in July of 1518, it was documented that a woman began to dance fervently in the street in modern day France. People thought it was kind of like a performance, like they thought she just was a really happy individual and she decided to go dancing in the street. Let me fix this just slightly. I don't want my tablet falling off behind there. And they thought it was like a real neat performance, completely random, until more and more people also began to dance fervently in the streets. So the historical documents, which there are, now these included doctor's notes, cathedral sermons given on the subject matter of people dancing in the streets, local and regional chronicles, and even notes issued by the Strasbourg City Council. Now, obviously, more well documented, it was the more documented it was, as people had no idea what this was. So, like, they were trying to figure out what was happening. So it got documented everywhere. Like, it became, like, I'm sure, a thing of gossip to, like, did you see that? And were you involved in that? It is going, Ronnie, and hopefully it is going for you as well, lovely lady. So at first, a group of mostly younger women joined with the single woman who had begun starting this out of jumping in the street, dancing randomly, but she didn't stop. And they didn't stop. It went on so long that people ended up dropping like flies from extreme exhaustion and totally not, addressing their physical needs and hurting themselves because of how hardcore they were going at dancing. I mean, we're talking rib breaking, the whole 9 yards. So it went on for so long that local magistrates, bishops, page turn, trusty notebook, and a number of doctors had to intervene and put the afflicted in the hospital because they weren't listening to any verbal commands on stopping this mania, and this dance pandemic is kind of how they looked at it, like it was some illness that they were being afflicted with, but they really didn't know what to call it or what it was. It is a possible idea, Sandy, and we're going to delve into that a little bit more, actually, further into the show of, like, looking at modern theories as to what this is and what came out of it. So similar events were said to have occurred throughout the medieval ages, including the 11th century. So in the 10 years, 10,000, like 1,050 or whatever. And let's see if I can say this correctly, Kolbik, Saxony, where it was thought that, of course, demonic possession was part of it, or divine judgment was caused, because, of course, religious fervor was very high back then, and people were being forced to, basically switch things up to join it, be with the church, or you were against the church and then likely to die. So, but it was a very, very hard time to exist in human history, with poverty and starvation. It's coming on the heels of the Black Plague having ravished Europe, where millions of people died from that. So, people were not doing great back then. And they wondered too if that couldn't have possibly been part of it. So some of the controversy surrounding these events. Now, there is some controversy as to whether any victims of this plague actually died or didn't or not from dancing themselves to death, or was it something else? Right, exactly. Could have been the Fae, Tanya, you never know. So, I couldn't find any numbers related to, like, okay, if 50 to 400 people were seen dancing in the street, like, I don't know, 380 of them died or something. There wasn't a number like that anywhere in the research. So I think it varied from location to location where this took place, just how many maybe succumbed to injuries gotten during the events. It gets weirder, trust me. You wait, you're going to be like, what? So a modern day gentleman, his name was John Waller, and he's done some research, and he's an author and written some books and stuff on a variety of different topics. So he's given his say so on in different journal articles and such these incidences. One of them being, let's see, he wrote a book titled, quote, "A Time to Dance, a Time to Die, The Extraordinary Story of the Dancing Plague of 1518." So that was one of his books. Waller cited sources that said that there were deaths that were all came from later accounts of the events, meaning that people who wrote about the events after the fact, over the course of several years following the events, they listed that there were people who died from them. However, more closer to the timeline of when they occurred, deaths weren't listed as being a thing. So it's unknown whether those are valid accounts or not, or people, with the retelling of stories, people add to it and give, exaggerations, make it their own story by adding pieces to it. So to make it worse, because of the stuff of urban legends of the time, it's aggravating, and gosh, 1,200 people across Europe died from this. Well, we don't know that because nothing was documented. Exactly. You know what? Mary singing Mick Jagger, Dave Bowie song while doing the research for this. I finally had to turn music on to others because I couldn't get it. So Waller cited sources that said that all that he disagrees with other more modern theories surrounding the events as having been caused by food poisoning. Now, this is oddly accepted as what was behind it. There's a type of it's kind of like a mold sort of bacteria that can grow on seeded like crops, right, wheat, that type of stuff. Hopefully you're not having any trouble, or try going out and coming back in, Natalie. Flash mobs, right? So the theory was called ergotism, and was thought that it's a type of food poisoning, basically. And because of growth on this, I'm speaking up just so I know. I am speaking up on my presentation like I always do. So I'm not sure where you guys would be having issues with sound universally. That's odd. I don't think it's anything on our end. Katie can double check it behind the scenes. Okay, so Katie, if you are listening, everyone in group is reporting having trouble hearing me. And I don't know if it's related to the broadcast or not, but obviously I am. What's that?
I'm checking.
Okay, Katie's check, guys, just to see if it is on our end. Everyone's now saying, oh yeah, no, we're going in and out. So she's checking it. So hopefully one or two people can hear it. Everyone else is saying I'm going in and out, or robot voice mode, or they're having trouble hearing it.
Yeah, there isn't any problem on my end at all.
Huh. Yeah, so I don't know why else there'd be a problem, guys. I checked the sound on my side before coming on as well, and my volume is all the way up on my end. Hi, Stace. And I do project my voice just by habit, I guess. By doing the show, I talk louder than I need to because of that. So I'm not sure, guys. Breaking up, not sound level. Okay, so they can hear me okay, but I'm breaking up, I guess, for them.
It could just be the internet worldwide. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be some glitchy thing, Facebook, screwing around, who knows. So hopefully Yes, Sandy's saying I sound fine now, so hopefully I will stay sounding fine. All right, so I'll repeat the last bit I said. Yep, Sandy, both Sandys are saying it's okay now. Good. Okay, so Waller wrote this book on A Time to Dance, A Time to Die, the extraordinary story of the dancing plague of 1518. And Waller cited sources that said that the deaths were more from later accounts of the events, meaning that they had were written about well after the fact. So he wasn't sure of whether or not it was, kind of added to into the story, so to speak, because I found no numbers during the research related to closer of any recordings of this back when it happened, whether it was through doctor's notes, journals, what have you. And there was some of that I encountered in the research, that so and so from the year 1520 wrote this. So there was no listing of deaths tolls in there, but it was kind of like embellished after the fact, he thought. A common theory now, looking back at it, was like a modern theory, and Waller disagrees with this, that it was caused by food poisoning by a toxic and psychoactive ergo fungi, it's called, that commonly grows on grains. It's called ergotism theory, and apparently it can cause hallucinations, things like that. Now, Weller argues that this theory doesn't seem tenable, since it's unlikely that those poisoned by ergo could have danced for days at a time. Hey, Aaron, nor would so many people have reacted to its psychotropic chemicals in the same way. That ergotism, and it's spelled ERGOTISM. He said that the ergotism theory also fails to explain why virtually every outbreak occurred somewhere along the Rhine and Moselle rivers. These were areas that were linked by water, but quite different climate-wise and crops growing at the time. So not all of them had the same growing to have access to, like rye and wheat or whatever, simultaneously across the board. So that varied. And he added that quote in to, it was called The Lancet, which was a weekly peer-reviewed medical journal, that he cited that, he didn't think that everybody would have access to the same crops at the same time or react right. People tripping balls. Exactly, Karen. And, the only thing that I think is of interest in that theory that was reported repeatedly throughout all my research is several people claim to be having visions while dancing. So could some of those people have been affected by this ergotism theory? Yes, absolutely. I'm not going to say absolutely across the board, no, because many were reporting having, visions. However, that said, could the visions have been brought on by the release of the endorphins and all that stuff, that they were raising the levels up by all this manic dancing that could go on for days till they dropped? Could they have reached a plateau point where they were starting to hallucinate by lack of food, water, and the exertion and the endorphins released? Maybe, but that was something universally reported through most of the reports, that many of the participants had visions. So could that have been caused by this ergotism theory? And what's behind it? Yes, maybe. I'll say that, maybe. Another popular theory regarding, as far as an explanation of it anyway, is the stress-induced mass hysteria. Now, this is the prime go-to of, from a psychological standpoint, of an easy peasy write-off explanation for virtually anything that happens where people experience something either of a paranormal nature, supernatural nature, unexplained nature, but we don't know what's behind it. We say it's mass hysteria. Yeah, I don't always agree with that one. Mass hysteria is defined as a condition affecting a group of persons characterized by excitement or anxiety, irrational behavior or beliefs, or inexplicable symptoms of illness. Modern theorists suggest that it was an example of mass hysterical event or mass psychogenic illness. Now, a psychogenic illness is the rapid spread of illness signs and symptoms affecting members of a cohesive group originating from the nervous system and doesn't have any organic causation, meaning that they're not sick from within, and it's caught by contagion, a virus or something that's going around that people are catching from one another that's causing these things to happen. So they think it's like a psychogenic event or mass hysteria. Those are the two most popular theories I encountered in all the research, but the secondary one being the ergotism theory, which I have to agree somewhat with Weller that they're all happening near different waterways and so forth, so they wouldn't necessarily have all the same crops growing simultaneously to have access to the same crops, where the ergo bacteria, mold, fungi would be growing on in the same way or be impacted the same way by the psychotropic STDs. Hey, that's a possibility too, I suppose. That the psychotropic effects that this mold fungi causes, they wouldn't be impacted the same way any more so than someone nowadays using mushrooms or dropping acid, that type of thing, that they're going to have the same, experiences across the board. That it doesn't happen. So, well, that's one of seizures were part of the symptomology, but yes, they were really dancing. Absolutely, really dancing, Tanya. So let's see. The incident, Waller suggested or speculates that it could have resulted from the horrid living conditions that they'd been living in, as that region had been riddled with starvation and disease, coupled with people's tendencies at that time towards superstitions. And again, they were just coming down off of the effects of the Black Plague. So, most of the population got wiped out, or you at least knew somebody who was taken down by the Black Plague. So I'm not a fungi, I'm a fungal. We're not. Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I knew what you meant, Tanya. Now it gets even more interesting in kind of how this played out over different areas. So 7 other cases of the dancing plague were reported in the same region during the medieval period. So it wasn't just during the year 1518 in that specific area of modern day France. It was 7 other cases of it where mass dancing took place, happened in 7 other locations throughout Europe at the same time during the medieval era. Sometimes thousands of people involving men, women, and children would be involved in dancing until they collapsed from both exhaustion and injuries being noted. Now, it probably wouldn't take a huge, massive amount to have people who were living with starvation and disease to drop from dancing, but it is said many of them danced for days. So, but they would keep going well past the point most of us would fall into a chair and be like, oh, I need a break, give me a beer or whatever. They would keep going. So the first outbreak was recorded in 1374, and it spread throughout Europe from Germany to France in 1518. So it kind of kept happening along the way between 1374 and 1518. This affected thousands across several different centuries. Dance-a-thons gone wrong, right? That entered my mind too, as picturing dance-a-thons. Despite being well documented, it was still poorly understood, and remedies were completely based on guesswork. Medicine's come a long way since those days, we can say that, right? So often musicians would join in, figuring that it would treat the mania, which you add music to a dancer, you're going to dance more, right? Yeah, Renaissance fairs would be awesome, but could you imagine like whole cities full of people going to the Renaissance fair at the same time? You know, so they would play music thinking that was going to stop it or something, but you add music to people who are already dancing, well, that's going to egg them on, like, just a foregone conclusion by my reckoning, but so usually that it would end up backfiring. Who knew, and encouraged more people to join in. Most scholars think that the aforementioned psychogenic illness to relieve the stress induced by poverty, but its true cause still remains unknown. So much fun. Yeah, I think they were poisoned by herb poisoning as well as people who got the Black Plague. I mean, I'm not ruling out the ergo poisoning as being in certain areas some causes, but saying it is the universal thing responsible for it, I'm going to say no, because again, not everyone is going to respond to psychotropics the same way and the same time universally through several hundreds of years. And again, by this time, the Black Plague had already swept through Europe. So this is in the after effects past, when the Black Plague hit. So it had kind of already done its dirty work, so to speak. And that's why they were living in such starvation and poor conditions, is because that just had wiped out a third of their population. So it's not, you can't really attribute it to the Black Plague, but and I think some cases might have been prompted by the ergo poisoning, but I don't think it can be listed as a universal reason. So again, most scholars think that the aforementioned psychogenic illness to relieve the stress induced by poverty might be a good reason as to what was behind it, but its true cause still to this day remains unknown. Now, apparently, no one thought to interview the participants, what prompted them to join in, and keep going until they were dropping like flies, ignoring their body's needs in doing so. I didn't come across a single record where it said Mrs. Jones was interviewed after the fact and she said, "This is why I jumped into the fray," or "I was driven to, I couldn't help myself," whatever her reasoning. None of that was done. Yes, but poor people relied on bread, mainly rye. That is correct. But if they were starving, then how many had access to the rye? So, or the things to make bread. And the starvation, that part of it was very clearly put throughout there. No, because the Americas were not that populated during the medieval periods. The small colonies were here and there, but that's about it. The United States wasn't developed all the way yet at that time. So again, I didn't find anything that talked to the participants to say, "Hey, what drove you to do this?" But outbreaks that were recorded throughout history include like the timeline of events. So the earliest known outbreak of the dancing plague or dance mania happened in around the 7th century. So it would have been the year 600 and something. And it occurred in the year sometime in the 1020s range. So the year 1026 or whatever, didn't give a specific year in that decade. You had lied to then. Well, you got to think too, the plague came from rats that were carrying fleas, that the fleas are what transmitted the plague. So, in well-developed areas like the old country, rats ran rampant, especially in poverty-riddled areas to begin with. Then, so we weren't affected here because our country wasn't fully formed yet. So, it occurred in the year 1020 in Bernburg, Germany, where 18 peasants started singing and dancing around a church, disturbing the Christmas Eve services. Got documented. Further outbreaks happened in the 13th century, so in the 1200s, including one in 1237, where a large group of children traveled from I can't do German either. Ergut, I'm going to say, Germany, to Armstad, which was 20 kilometers away or 12.4 miles. And of course, they didn't have cars, so they would have to walk or ride in carriages perhaps. But it said that they jumped and danced the entire way. So for the entire 12.4 mile journey, the children sang and danced and jumped up and down, or jumping around. It said jumping and dancing the whole way. Hey, Alice. So in 1278, 200 people danced on a bridge over the River Meuse in France, causing the bridge to collapse. No Mothman was noted there, however. Ha ha ha. The plague is here now. It's still around. Prairie dogs in my town tested positive for it recently. There's very isolated cases where it crops up, but it's certainly not become an actual plague here. So yes, there are fleas and things that test positive for it, but it hasn't swept through. Right, it's treatable now. So again, in 1278, 200 people danced on a bridge over the River Meuse in France and causing the bridge to collapse. But there was no Mothman to give warning on that one. It's a joke, guys. I know you're secretly laughing. Some people believe that Lyme disease from ticks was man-made and the government purposely did this to cause disease. That is suspected still in some New England states like Connecticut. We actually talked about that in another show I did on some lab that was thought to do genetic testing and things. Wonder if that's where the Pied Piper story came to be. Yes, Brenda, yes. There was a hinting at that very much like the Pied Piper leading, in the children. But yeah, they were like jumping and dancing the whole way. But many survivors were restored to full health at a nearby chapel. Now, this chapel got mentioned over and over and over again in the church. So I'm kind of guessing that a lot of those incidents took place during this time. I wonder if they impregnated the police. I don't know. Obviously, the government research wasn't going on back in the year 1078, or 1578, but the first major outbreak happened between 1373 and 1374, with incidents reported in England, Germany, and the Netherlands. Now, June 24th, 1374 was one of the biggest episodes beginning in Aachen, Germany, before spreading onto other countries, including Italy and Luxembourg. How do you knock up fleas? I don't know. Intentionally breeding, I guess. Forgot to take the pill. No, we weren't scientifically advanced enough back then to do that. They didn't even actually have formalized governments back then. In fact, in Europe, most of it was monarchy. Okay, enough of that. So in 1375 to 76, incidents recorded in France, Germany, and the Netherlands. 1381, it cropped up in Augsburg, Germany. In 1418 in Strasbourg, where people fasted for days and the outbreak was thought to be caused by exhaustion. Now, that to me seems like a weird thing. If people are suffering from exhaustion, that didn't make sense to me, but that's what the research said, was that it was the outbreak of having people get up and dance until they drop like flies was caused by exhaustion. Okay. I just am the messenger, guys. Okay, so in 1428, in Schaffhausen, Germany, a monk actually danced himself to death there, and his death was recorded. The same year in Zurich, Germany, a group of women were noted to be affected by this. I find it interesting that it was a monk. July 1518 in Strasbourg was the best known case, kind of where it is listed as having started, but digging further into the records, it does go way further back by almost 500 years. But the best known case was in Strasbourg in Germany, where a woman began dancing in the street. And this was the incident where between 50 to 400 people joined in. Could have been a parasite, kind of like zombies. Yeah, I mean, its cause is unknown. So she just began dancing in the street, and people at first thought that, oh, she's just a joyous person, she's having fun. But then before long, more and more people started joining her. Again, it's a wide number, and I'm not sure what accounts for that variance of 50 to 400 people. I'm not sure why that is, if they couldn't count or what it was, but upwards to 400 people joined in. Further incidents happened in the 16th century in 1536 in Basel, Germany, involving a group of children. It didn't elaborate besides saying that much. In 1551 in Anhalt, Germany, involved only one guy being affected. Now, of interest, in the 17th century, incidences of recurrent dancing, quote unquote, were recorded by a professor of medicine, Gregor Horst, who wrote, and I quote, several women who annually visit the chapel of St. Vitus. Now, this is a chapel I mentioned a few minutes ago that was mentioned repeatedly, repeated incidences having taken place in and around this chapel. So the one that happened where people were dancing around the church, disrupting Christmas service, that was the St. Vitus chapel. Also, several people through many of the incidences would be taken to the St. Vitus chapel for treatment. Try that, in downtown area and you'd get locked up. Exactly. So he said several women annually visit the chapel of St. Vitus. So they were also taken there after the bridge collapsed as well. In Droffelhausen, they dance madly all day and all night until they collapse in ecstasy. In this way, they come to themselves again and felt little or nothing until the next May, when they are again forced around St. Vitus Day to take themselves to that place. One of these women is said to have danced every year for the past 20 years and another for a full 32 years, end quote. So apparently this St. Vitus chapel is a place where many people make like a pilgrimage to. Now, St. Vitus is the patron saint of dancers and entertainment. So that's kind of interesting in that way. Right. Some would say they experience ecstasy, which again, I think could be related to the endorphins released. But the visions part, that's where the part about the visions reported in some of the stories. That's what kind of gives me pause to say, was those cases that ergo poisoning because of the psychotropic nature of ergo poisoning, like that can, it's a fungi it's mushrooms. So, or what, fungi. And so that's one of the symptoms of being exposed to that, is having visions. And many of these people report visions. But again, could that have been caused from the extreme endorphin levels? Yeah. And the ecstasy, especially if it involved like a religious fervor of the St. Vitus, then we know and have seen many cases where that can happen too. So by the 17th century, dancing mania or dancing plague seems to have mostly died out. So what are some of the characteristics of this dancing plague or dancing mania? Several have been recorded, like generally occurring during times of hardships. Some reports of up to tens of thousands of people would appear to dance for hours, days, weeks, and even months. Tens of thousands of people. Women have been recorded as being mainly afflicted in modern literature anyway. Wonder if that's where the maypole for children originated from as well. Yeah, I don't know the origins of that, but it is like a pilgrimage people would make to celebrate St. Vitus Day and go to St. Vitus Chapel. And that's where a lot of the victims were taken who were afflicted in that area. They would be taken to that chapel for treatment or to recover themselves, what have you. So again, women are shown to be mainly afflicted, at least in referencing modern literature, although contemporary sources suggest otherwise. Now, whether the dancing was spontaneous or an organized event has also been debated, as in, hey, this is planned and maybe a traveling troupe of dancers getting involved. And you're going to see where I say that in a minute. So that's also been debated, but it wasn't an organized social event gone wrong. But consistently noted is that dancers seem to be in a state of unconsciousness, unable to control themselves. So from a standpoint of social phenomena, an author, Robert Bartholomew, notes that contemporary sources say that participants often don't reside where the dancing took place, but instead would travel place to place with others joining along the way. He noted how they often would wear colorful attire and held wooden sticks. So that's kind of alluding to it being kind of like a traveling dance troupe and people joining in to participate. Now, I'm sure that's not across the board in every location, but could it account for some of the recorded incidents? Yeah, sure, why not? That would, to me, yeah, early flash mobs, exactly, Sandy. That to me would make sense for some of them. And we all know, like, you go to a rock concert and how people can get who are, with the mob hits down by the, or the pit mobs down by the front of the stage, and just how insanely crazy people get with dancing and carrying on. You get caught up in the moment, so they could be joining in on that. Wonder if they went ahead and soiled themselves dancing for days. Oh gosh, I would imagine, yes. And hygiene wasn't what it is now amongst people. There wasn't deodorant and all that stuff, and showering daily. You mostly would have a big tub of water that would be used by several members of the same family, and bathing was like a once a month event. Yes, mosh pits. Thank you, Sandy. So bathing was not a thing. Hygiene was not a thing back then. Mob mentality, correct. I do think that would account for some of it, of just people getting caught up in the moment and joining in. But could there be, in some cases, traveling troops, because some were noted to be wearing, dressy, colorful clothing and having wooden sticks, which I'm guessing might have been banged together for the sound effect or to carry a beat with, maybe. Yeah, smelly event. But then again, Tanya, when everybody smells bad, do you notice it still? Or if you're surrounded by a bad scent and you're smelling nothing but that all the time, you probably wouldn't even notice it anymore, as yucky as that is. Hygiene and all that medicine, everything has come so far from the medieval days. But I have read about that before, how they would heat up like a big wooden barrel, if you will, of hot water, and then the entire family would take turns bathing in the exact same water. Husbands, wives, children, the works, and a month's worth of grime from a whole big, huge family. To our standards, yeah, that's disgusting. But back then, that was the norm. Hygiene was not a big concern. Long dresses with corsets, yeah. So, it doesn't say what the costumes or dress clothes consisted of, other than they were often colorful attire. At a concert, you smell the weed, right? Now, a gentleman by the name of Robert Marks, in his study of hypnotism, notes that some wore garlands in their hair even, which again kind of attributes to the idea that there could be some traveling group that perhaps in some cases. Now, I don't think that you would find a traveling troupe of dancers going around to all those different countries and cities that were affected because, transportation wasn't a thing. It was a slow process back then. So, I don't think that accounts in every case, but could it account in some of them that got recorded and talked about? Yes, of course. I don't discount it anyway. Is that part of it anyway? Now, Bartholomew says that some even, quote, pranced around naked, made obscene gestures, had intercourse, and others acted like animals, jumping, hopping, and leaping about, end quote. Now, of some note, this is my interjection, some of this sounds like they were kind of mostly, again, kind of the mob mentality swept up into it. If you get those higher numbers where, like, they were talking about 10,000 people being affected, I think a big chunk of that could be people getting caught up in it in the moment and running with it. Now, if you thought that last little part about obscene gestures and intercourse and all that was interesting, some were reported to dance till they broke their ribs and died. Some screamed, laughed, cried, or sang. Bartholomew also reports people observing the dancing mania were treated violently if they refused to join in. Smells like teen spirit. That's funny, Mary. Yeah, if teens locker or, boys locker room, maybe. So in other words, if, they refused to join in the dancing, then some of them were kind of dragged into it and treated violently if they didn't join in and agree to come in and join, grabbing onto people, I'm sure, trying to force them into it. So could that have played a role as well? Sure, absolutely. Others still seem to respond oddly to the color red. Some not being able to perceive the color or even responded violently towards it. I can't explain that one whatsoever. Bartholomew also notes that those affected by the dancing plague suffered from a variety of ailments, including chest pains, convulsions, hallucinations, hyperventilation, epileptic fits, which would be kind of along the same line as convulsions or seizures, or visions, or ecstasy. Most would end up dropping, overwhelmed by the exhaustion of having danced for days. It did seem contagious, though, striking families, individuals, and small groups. Now, here's where it kind of takes an interesting twist. Semi-unrelated, but very similar phenomena happened with this next batch. I found it very interesting that it kind of took this turn. There was something called tarantism. So of interest in Italy was similarly noted that a phenomenon known as tarantism, where victims were said to have been poisoned by a tarantula or a scorpion, bitten or stung. Yes, I write on even the section parts. The earliest recorded outbreak was in the 13th century, so back in the 1200s. An only known antidote was to dance to peculiar music, and it was thought that separated venom from the blood. Again, needless to say, medicine has come a long way since then. And it was noted that the particular music was like local folk music type music that was played, but it was thought to separate the venom from the blood. I'm not sure how or what capacity or how it would be expressed in the body. That part isn't listed, but that was the idea. So as with the dancing plague, people would suddenly begin to dance, sometime affected by a perceived bite or sting, and were joined by others who thought that the venom of their old bites were reactivated by heat or even the music, which would at least temporarily, quote, cure the victim. Make sure my chat hasn't stalled. Okay. Some participated in other activities, like, gets interesting, like tying themselves up with vines and then whipping each other, pretending to sword fight, drinking large amounts of wine, and jumping into the sea. Now, it didn't state if it was jumping into the sea off of cliffs, which hopefully not. No suicide runs there, but just said simply jumping into the sea. Some died if there was no music to go with their dances. Interesting as well. Sufferers had symptoms resembling the dancing mania, like headache, trembling, twitching, and visions of what it was. I came across none of, like I said, it almost seems like nobody interviewed the participants or victims of this to see what did they experience really, like what were the visions about. So we don't know what they saw or what they thought they saw. Like with others with the color red, with the tarantism, these do not like the color black, and more women were affected than men. Tarantism seemed confined mostly to Italy and Southern Europe, and was common actually until the 17th century, so 1600s, but ended suddenly. So this coincides with the recordings of the dancing mania in like Germany and modern day France areas. They both seem to kind of die down and die out by the 17th century. There may have been like small, minor events happening randomly, but not like the mob dancing like you saw before. Say mushrooms. Well, again, Renee, like the ergo theory was that the ergo is a type of fungi that grows on the grains that they would consume. But again, most of them are living in starvation. So how much of the grains did they have access to consume? And the tarantism really was localized to Italy and Southern Europe only, versus Germany and France were a big chunk of where the people who were recorded having this happen in those areas. Now, there were, like I said, there were small local outbreaks that would happen, and interestingly, this shocked me. So there were small local outbreaks in Italy recorded as recently as 1959, mere 70 years ago. So now we're not talking 500, 600 years ago. We're talking a mere, 70 some years ago that would take place. Reminds me of the nursery rhyme, Ring Around the Rosie. Ring Around the Rosie is actually talking about the plague. Ring around the rosy, like kind of getting delirious, and pocket full of posies, putting, herbs and flowers to kind of mask the smell of death. Ashes, because they'd burn the bodies. We all fall down. So people getting affected and killed off by the plague. So that's where Ring Around the Rosie came from, just as a side note. Always a teachable moment. Okey pokey. Funny, Renee. Now, so again, the most recent case happened as recently as 1959 in Italy. Now, most participants admitted to not having been bitten by a tarantula or stung by a scorpion, but thought that they were infected by someone who had, or simply maybe touched a spider. Not necessarily tarantula, it just said a spider. So they are twisted and they have very dark origins, absolutely. We did have it on the table once, but nobody voted for it, so it got dropped. Like the origins of them. So the result was mass panic that allowed people to behave in ways not usually socially acceptable, which kind of leads me to believe that many may have used it as an excuse to act in socially, inexcusable ways or unacceptable ways that violated local ordinance laws, etc., of expected behavior, and casting off social norms. Do you know if it was Southern or Northern Italy? It didn't specify that, Brenda. It just said Italy and Southern Europe. So I don't know. Look it up online, I guess, and see if it does say that, but I didn't notice any of that. No, they are very much so, Karen. And like I said, the origins of nursery rhymes was at one point on the list, but nobody voted for it, so I ended up dropping it. I heard the Ring Around the Rosie line referred to a rash that formed in a ring. It could be partly the rash that came with the plague, like the pustules that would form on your skin, but it was referring to the plague. So Tarantism and the dancing plague / mania are often considered to be kind of synonymous with each other because they're so similar in nature. So even though one was said to be a result of insect venom versus coming from who knows what, the resulting actions from them were the same. Now, as far as cures go, as with Tarantism, folk dances were used. And again, some people said that if the right music wasn't played, that they were inflicted with this. So, that's getting picky, I think. I'm going to dance off forever for days at a time till I drop. You best play the right decade of music or else I'm not going to be happy, In Germany, especially religious intervention was thought to be needed, hence seeking Saint Vitus, who is thought to be the patron saint of dancers and entertainers. Some dancers were isolated and exorcisms, of course, got performed on them, as it was thought that they were possessed by evil spirits and taking them over. And as same thing for those who were experiencing seizures, epileptic fits, convulsions, however they chose to term that. It's still seizures, but they thought it emanated from being possessed. Yes, the rash is a symptom, correct. Subsequent theories about what causes, what happened with it. So while numerous hypotheses have been made for the dancing plague, it remains unclear whether it was a real illness or a social phenomena, or people were, from a religious cult. That's another idea that it gets brought up in the discussion of this topic was it part of a religious cult where the level of fervency that people experience in order to cause them to dance, much like some churches, their members will speak in tongues, or they will seemingly fall to the ground having, quote, fits, and it's the Holy Spirit supposed to be taking them over. It's some of it related to that they were so religious that this is what they claim brought it on, is thought to be part of it as well. Or was it all staged? To the previously mentioned ergotism poisoning, to stress relief, the poverty of the day, that is also thought to be a common reason why it took place by modern theorists, looking back at all that took place and all that was happening historically regarding these events, is that, it was people were letting off steam and kind of just throwing caution to the wind, losing their social norms in order to deal with the poverty of the day. Somebody spiked a Kool-Aid, right? Two participants were also sometimes thought that they could have been disturbed. That thought crossed my mind. And that's another thing too, is could it have been something like, something from, the water? Because I'm sure back then they weren't aware of sterilizing water that came from, like, say, a river or something. And people would bathe in the river and get water for their animals in there, or lead animals through it, and who'd be pooping and peeing in it. And it's, you're supposed to boil water that comes from places like that. So if they were drinking water straight from that, I'm sure the bigger places had wells and things, but there was no cleaning of the water before you ingested it. So could have something like that been responsible for part of it? Maybe. And, or, again, some people were written off as being, disturbed, quote unquote, mentally ill, as being a factor into it. Or taking part in it out of fear, cultural contagion, or even angry spirits capable of inflicting a dancing curse to punish their victims. That was another, which is kind of keeping with the you're possessed by evil spirits thing. But, there are some people, even though back in that time period, paganism and so forth had been banned by the church, and any practice or outward expression of being pagan or Druidic beliefs, they had, that wasn't allowed. So was this used as an excuse to kind of be able to do the dancing and expression of that celebration over perhaps the pagan holiday that came up on the calendar for them? Were they dancing in celebration for that, but in kind of like throwing caution to the wind regarding the church? Maybe, where it was talking about like basically a love fest free for all with having an orgy going on and people, it was like, what's that patron saint of, oh, what's his name? Actually, it's a Greek Roman deity or Greek deity who, it's related to grapes and wine. I can see the image of him in my head, but I can't think of what he was called. But anyway, he was like sort of like the deity of fun and letting loose and mayhem happening, people throwing all those social norms to the wind, in terms of having orgies and the drinking of the wine and play fighting with toy swords or pretend swords, tying themselves up with vines and then whipping each other, that type of stuff. Reason why most Italians in Italy drink wine is because the water isn't really drinkable. Yeah. Green sleeves. I'm not sure what that is, but there's a Greek deity that is, and I'm blanking on the name of him, but it's like on the tip of my tongue. He usually was seen as a really overweight, slovenly kind of guy, slopping the wine everywhere, drunk, and promoting that party vibe amongst everybody. But anyways, it could have been some of it pertaining to that because Druidism and paganism was banned by the church. Could they have actually, or some of even those traveling troops of dancers who were showing up in colorful attire, could they have been belonging to something like that in celebration of Diana? Is that what it is? Dionysus? That's not what was on the tip of my brain, but we'll go with that, Tanya. Thanks. It's a Greek name anyway. So could that have been that of a celebration, kind of throwing your nose in the air at the church, saying, you're going to ban us from celebrating our belief system? Well, guess what? And we can pull it off as being a sickness going through, or maybe the church perceived that celebration coming from an illness when it really wasn't, when they were really just partying it up, losing their minds for a while. But it did people would go on for days, or again, end up with broken ribs and things and dropping from exhaustion before they would stop. So it was almost like it became a compulsion to dance. I think it was an excuse to drink more wine. Let's see more. They used to drink beer, vodka, and mead for the reason. Yep. Demetrius. Dionysus, the Greek god of partying. We'll go with that. Yeah. It's not the name that was stuck in my head of him, but you're probably right. Unlike the purely carnal Pan or purely intoxicated Dionysus, Comus was a god of excess. The same idea as all of those, yes, like kind of throwing your nose up at the church saying, we're going to do this anyway, and the church perceiving, because they had banned those things, so people are doing it, well, my goodness, they must be possessed and they're losing their minds, and it must be a plague, because nobody would, intentionally go against the church in that way, because, well, I mean, technically, yeah, it could lead to death happening for, being a traitor of the church and not conforming. But I think that could have, in some cases, played into it, perhaps, that people getting kind of contagious with that, once the fun began, joining in, partying it up, almost like the purge idea of, everybody joining in, wreaking havoc all night long. But this could go on for days, months, and they said that it was an annual thing around this church of St. Midas. So, I definitely think that religious fervor could play into it in some way. but that's not going to account for the whole thing, or as widespread as it was, or that many who got afflicted for so many centuries, really. I mean, if this was first noted back in the 10th century, then that would have been in like the year 900s, where it was first noted to be happening, and went up until the 1600s with local minor cases happening in Italy in 1959. Well, there's more to this, obviously. So I think it could be a combination of reasons behind it that led to it happening. But the church was perceiving it as that they were being cursed and punished for their sins, or that they were, possessed and needed exorcisms, whatever. Take them to the church will heal them and make them better. So, yes, I think that definitely plays into it to at least some degree, anyway. So, but again, the reasoning behind it, I think, is going to be influenced at least somewhat differently based on the location. So in those taking place in Germany and modern day France areas, we've seen over different shows I've done, even like Natalie had made a post on Facebook concerning the type of dress that people dressed in back in a certain period from Germany. I mean, those are pretty out there, and some of their thought processes of how the Germans perceive things. And that was where a big chunk of it was recorded in 1518. So could those differences in beliefs versus, say, Italy or Southern Europe influence the why it happened? And I think the mob mentality thing does come into play, much like today during riots we see happening. People jump and join in, destroying things and raising hell for what? It's not something they would atypically do, but they're caught up in the moment of it, quote unquote, and run with it. So I think that would be a big part of that, when it would involve the larger numbers. Sandy said, I Googled him. Dionysus is the god of the grape harvest, winemaking and wine, of fertility, orchards and fruit, vegetation, insanity, ritual madness, religious ecstasy, festivity, and theater in ancient Greek religion myth. He's also known as Bacchus. Bacchus, that was the name I had in my head. That's it. I knew I recognized it if somebody said it. Bacchus was the name I was thinking of. So yes, same character then. Thank you, Sandy. The debauchery, which the core root of that word comes from the word Bacchus, it kind of plays into that of letting loose of social norms, partying it up, joining in, even though you may be a very restrained individual on your own time. When something like that's going on around you, you may be drawn into the excitement of it happening. And, sure, if it was a random one or two people doing it, you may just be like, oh, yay, dancer in the street, yay, and not think much of it. But more people, you might get a few random strangers joining in. It's okay, Jake. That was just mommy being silly. He sits up like, what? You get a few more people saying, hey, this is fun, let's do this. And then it building from there. And maybe even that's why the numbers varied so much in the initial reports from the dates of 1518, where it was like 50 to 400. That's a big ass discrepancy. I'm sorry. I can't, how can you not tell the difference from 50 people and 400 people? I'm sure there might be some who after the fact, oh no, I didn't participate in that. That wasn't me. But if that was the case of the party atmosphere and join the crowd thing, would you want to take, own up to it, considering how nearly puritanical some of the belief systems could be with certain things back then? And as their stress reliever from their disease, poverty, starvation stuff, well, sure, it could be a big block party happening to throw off steam. People in the South get a wild hair. Exactly. hamming it up, living it up in the moment. But for those that would do it to the point of impacting themselves physically to where they would do it for days till they dropped, I mean, we still see that to some degree, I think, historically speaking, in like all the concerts and love fests of the 60s. I mean, look at Woodstock, for heaven's sakes, and all that took place there. That's pretty still kind of modern day. And, you know, that universal love one another vibe, we'll put it nicely that way, you know, that took place back then. So I think that could have played a big role in certain aspects of them. Not all of them. I will not blanketly say that across the board, but I think more than others, joining in from that mob mentality thing kind of fits the bill for me more so than the idea of being poisoned from the foods they were eating. Because again, many of them were starving. So how much grains were they eating if they were starving, really? You know, they wouldn't be eating much, would they? And so would they have access to all of that? I've heard of dance-a-thons in modern days, correct. That's what those cowboys do when they come to the trail rides and stay drunk the entire time they're here. Exactly. So, you know, it's a throwing off of social norms in a way to kind of, you know, celebrate, or somebody starts it, you join in for the fun. And I think, again, based on some of the reports concerning the colorful attire, there must have been traveling troops that went around like dance troops, and that encouraged others to join in and dance too. Now, it doesn't, again, fully explain it going on for, you know, a week or a month at a time or something. Of course not. And the physical body could not deal with that level of activity, that high level of activity for that long before most would drop. But especially if you're in a state of starvation and, you know, you don't have a lot of energy during that time or strength to do that kind of physical activity. But in the other areas where it took place, yeah, that definitely could be part of it, where, like I said, throwing off the social norms and doing their own modern day purge of going out and acting wild and nutso, losing their heads for a day, and then, or a few days, having like a block party type of thing, and then going back into it. Maybe they were just trying to encourage the arts. Exactly. Like, you know, the traveling troops coming around would be celebrated and almost be like a fair type of environment. And, you know, to be actively involved in that would be fun. That would be out of the norm. There's also bands of gypsies. Yeah, depending on what parts of Europe. Yeah. So that pretty much is the story of the dancing plague and or the dancing mania. Spring break town's gone wild, right? You know, I think that it's a multifaceted thing that took place. Definitely, I wouldn't go as far as saying hysteria as much as people getting caught up in whether it was religious fervor driving them to experience the ecstasy and hallucinations and such. I mean, it didn't come out and say hallucinations. Multiple times they referenced it as having visions. Could that have been brought on by the intensive level of physical activity of the hyper dancing for hours or days on end until they dropped? The levels of endorphins would be through the roof or something like that if you were truly enjoying yourself doing it. So, you know, could you have a vision from that? Yeah, sure, of course. But there were many reports of ecstasy being reported. So whether it was divine ecstasy or brought on by tripping out on the fungi, I think Dionysus had a big hand in that. You know, that's more what I'm leaning towards. Not because when I think of mass hysteria, I think of it in negative terms. People getting carried away, but in a bad way, like with the riots and stuff, where, you know, bad things are happening from mass hysteria. People are getting hysterical. You know, that's the root word of that. So I think that I don't like that connotation of that, I guess. Yes, because they weren't sleeping. Exactly. Sleep deprivation, lack of food and water, lack of meeting any of their physical needs. Eventually, you know, you can only go without sleep for 72 hours before hallucinations start. So that's a well-known psychological state of being where, and even like people reporting runner's high, it would be kind of equitable to that, the high achieved by people during high physical activity. With the levels of endorphins released, you get into a zone, and again, people are going to join in. So I think that is more what accounts for it. But I think, again, how I know, that'd be quite the diet plan, right? It is. No, yeah, definitely. And if you're starving already, I think it could be throwing off some steam of the stress they may have been living in. But I do feel like, kind of my theory on bringing in, depending on the time of year, celebrating the pagan or Druidic belief system. Just because the church made it illegal doesn't mean those beliefs stopped. People still practiced in private and in secret. So, if it was put across like, hey, we can't help it, we are being driven to do this, we can't stop ourselves, this is an illness, well, the church is going to look upon that more kindly than they would oh, this is a specific celebration for a paganistic holiday. So celebrating a specific holiday is going to be different, seen differently, perceived differently, and more accepted by the church. But they still took them to the church to fix them, in and around the church anyway. So I think that obviously is a reflection of the amount of religious fervor in those times and how strong the reach was of the church in Europe during those times. But I don't think it can, any one theory does not cover every single case of this. So I don't know. Sorry, Jesse, you just messaged me. So there you go, guys. That is the dancing mania / dancing plague that took place for over the course of several hundred years. Natalie says maybe they couldn't keep track of the numbers because it was like a tag team event. Some folks got to eat, sleep, and pee, and then came back while others cut out. The best way to keep the ruse going so they could keep partying. Yeah, that definitely could play a role in some of it, Natalie. Absolutely. So that is the dancing plague in a nutshell. So the next Willows Bend is going to be June 7th. I can't believe we're going into June already. And that'll be for episode number 134. So the topics on the table we have are the oldest pyramid in the world, Cholula. It has a much longer, more formalized name that I cannot pronounce without writing it out, having it like sounded out, so to speak. Thank you, guys. So Cholula is one of its names, though, and it's the oldest known pyramid that's been discovered. Reptilian aliens, the Tunguska event. Oh, happy early birthday, Stace. Underground cities, or the Mary Celeste are what we have on the table right now. Yeah, I'll be doing the June's birthday post too tomorrow or tonight. Phonetically, thank you, Sandy. It's blanking on the words as I go to speak them. Let's see something here. Oh, okay. You, of course, are welcome. Thanks, girls. Love you later. Reptilian aliens for Ronnie. Pen on would be good. So, oldest pyramid in the world, Cholula. Reptilian aliens, the Tunguska event, underground cities, or Mary Celeste. All right, so we got, go back up here, Beth. Underground cities from Sandy Griffin, underground cities, Mary Ann, underground cities, Brenda. Underground cities, Sandy Miller, underground cities, Mary. Karen wants nursery rhyme origins on here again. Nursery rhyme origins. Gotcha, Karen. Renee says underground cities. I'll be on vacation next week, so I'll leave the boat to the rest of you, says Natalie. Okay. Pyramid or underground city, says Stacy. Oh, tomorrow's your birthday too, Tanya? Well, happy birthday to you too. And I, of course, will do a big ass post in Willows Bend group to acknowledge and celebrate our June birthdays. Mine's not till the end of the month. Don't think I got Chris. Let me go back and see. If I say your underground cities, Chris. Okay. Yeah, that's why I say people's names so that if I happen to miss you, don't say your name, you know I didn't see your vote. But I do have her now. Thank you, Sandy. Well, I mean, it kind of seems unanimously that underground cities is it for next week. So I do have the nursery rhyme origins on the table, Karen. So there we go. So that'll be June 7th, which is next Monday. And let's see here, what else we got? Book group this week will be June 2nd at 8 p.m. in the Willows Bend Through the Rooms tab underneath the group photo. Now we're probably going to be finishing up the book that we've been reading that was written by Jane Roberts. Let me get the cover of it so I can show you guys. The Coming of Seth book, we are almost done with it. We just got that tiny bit left to do. And so very well could start the Seth material as well. So there's that pending. So that'll be June 2nd at 8 p.m. in the rooms. And I will, of course, do up the event notice for that as well. And then on my Beyond the Veil page for readings Friday night, 8 p.m. Eastern time. And again, anybody who's watching or listening out there through any other channel, network, radio, iHeartRadio, wherever you're seeing and hearing us, then feel free to get a hold of me if you have a topic suggestion, and I will let you know whether we've covered it or not. I'm really good at responding to messages, so I don't ignore people. Not my style. Move all the stuff back away again. So thank you all for being here. We appreciate all of you. And so again, tomorrow night will be the special show. That's a school project for Amanda McManus's daughter, Paige, at 8 p.m. or sorry, 7 p.m. tomorrow night Eastern time, covering drug abuse, substance abuse, and its effects on society. So that'll be Tuesday, and then a book group Wednesday. So there we go, everybody. Love and light to everybody. Stay well, treat each other good out there, and I will see you guys around Facebook land and Soma Fusion as usual. And I will be part of the panel for tomorrow night as well. So have a wonderful night, guys. Lots of love. Good night.